had 250 employees at one point, and I learned that when I walk in the room, I could shut the room down by my body energy that I carry into my room. So I need to flesh that, shake that off before I walk into that room, because emotions are contagious, and I can sabotage an office inadvertently with just carrying in the junk that I was dealing with last night because of whatever, my kids' grades or whatever it was that's still hanging on me.
Welcome to Shaping the Basin. I am here with Rob Leone. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is a little bit different. We were just talking about you come to our area, but you
Yeah.
don't live here.
Yeah.
You're where are you from?
Although I love it here, right? So I eventually got here, started the journey a couple days ago in Pocatello, Idaho. And due to some flight changes in terms of services in different airports, it takes us 2 days now almost to get here. So we're rested, staying at the Running Y right now. Love it because we get out to walk and then see the community, and then we're in town with our clients for the rest of the week.
That's awesome. We may come back to some of that
Yeah.
because I would be curious a little bit about Pocatello and
Yeah.
Klamath. But one thing I wanted to jump in and ask about was you have a philosophy or quote that has something to do with work and the human spirit. Talk to me
Yeah.
about that philosophy.
Yeah. So my belief is that work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. And, if it's fun all the time, it's just not possible to sustain that. So we know that work is a challenge, and that at times it has its high points and its low points. But what I aspire for is that we create the conditions in organizations so that people leave work feeling, well, essentially that they have a fuel tank still full enough at the end of the day to go home and do the things they want to do, whether that's be with family, volunteer, hit the gym, whatever it is, that their work conditions are of such that they really look forward to going back there and they're not dreading it come the end of the day. And that's where our work comes in, is that we focus on organizational dynamics and people to help cultivate that, to help make that possible, because we're giving our best hours of our life to someone else in many instances, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you're okay. It's your time. But for most of us, we're working for someone else or something else. And wouldn't it be nice that you really enjoyed going back day after day, or at least 3 days a week you enjoyed going back, and maybe a couple other days are rough, but that's my focus.
Okay. I read about this. We hear that in one form or another, but can you tell me a story about maybe somebody you've even worked with that it was not that way, and some of the real changes that they made
Sure.
to shift?
Right. Okay. So there's whenever it comes to work and job satisfaction, or even like burnout, when people talk about burnout, whatever these things are, to me, there's several different perspectives to consider. But two real simple perspectives are the organization's perspective. And so how's the organization contributing into this, as well as the individual perspective, and how am I and my behaviors contributing into this? And so when we step back and look at that, there's a lot of variability and a lot of variables that go into this. And so something super basic that happens time and time again is that people just don't understand each other necessarily, and they don't click. And we can't be friends with everyone. But if we're working in the same environment, we need to maintain a professional relationship that's also productive, right? And then hopefully at the end, we feel good about those interactions. And one of the things that we look at are personality and personality dynamics, and how people are similar or different, and how that plays into or contributes to whether it's a performance-related issue, a disagreement, things like that. So first and foremost, everything that a human touches is complex, because the human is complex, right? And so if we approach that, then we need to acknowledge that how you see the world will be different than how I see the world through different lenses. But also you have your personality type, I have my personality type. And so there's all these things that are at play here. And what we see a lot of times, in speaking to specific examples, is that people just weren't jiving. They weren't connecting. And we know that having uncomfortable or difficult conversations aren't our favorite. Like, 3/4 of personality types don't like them at all. There's 1/4 that does, or that's comfortable with them. So right there, we have a barrier or an obstacle that maybe you and I are going to have to cross because we're approaching the world from two different points of view, two different personality dispositions. And that creates conflict. And because people don't like to deal with conflict, they avoid it. And then sometimes things get spun off because people leave and they ruminate or they talk to other people about the interaction. So time and time again, we see that we have leaders that might connect with a couple people on a team, but maybe there's several people that feel alienated, isolated, just because they're not connecting. And when you really pause and you start to learn about these things and these team dynamics, and you realize that even the crunchiest, most difficult leader is trying their best in many instances, you start to have a different perspective that, oh, maybe we all want the same things, but maybe how we're seeing it is different. And so what we encourage people to do is give each other a little bit of grace and benefit of the doubt, right? That your actions make sense to you, or you wouldn't be acting this way. Just like my actions make sense to me, or I wouldn't be acting this way. And when we stop and pause and reflect upon that, people go, oh, I never really thought about that in that way. So by bringing people through those kind of increasing self-awareness experiences, they start to now all of a sudden have a little bit more grace and patience with each other. You still might rub each other the wrong way because our communication styles are different, but once we recognize the kind of the humanity in each other, we can kind of support and embrace each other more and chalk it up to, yeah, we are different. Therefore, we approach things different, but it doesn't make Heather any less correct or more correct. It's just different. But what I do know is we all want the same things. And so this is consistent in numerous organizations, and it's helping the individuals at that team member level recognize these things in themselves and others, but then helping that leader recognize that all their people have some different unique perspectives and practices that aren't good or bad in one way or the other. They just are what they are. And help that leader then learn how to do that, how to embrace it, how to move through this process so that at the end of the day, you're feeling a little bit more fulfilled. You go home and felt heard, right? So one of the things we often ask people, especially leaders, have you ever thought that you're the common conversation topic at the dinner table of your employees? And when we say that, people go, like, they turn white. They never thought about that. And you think about it, when you weren't like a supervisor, when you were just an employee in a system, what happened when you went home at the end of the day and you had dinner? And it was like, so how was work? What went on? And you'd be like, oh, I can't believe, And so trying to gain some perspective there from that leadership standpoint to develop some empathy and a little bit more openness to all these things creates the space for people to really flourish and really lean into enjoying the work.
Mm-hmm. So if I summarize all of that, it sounds like your belief is that work fueling the human spirit has to do with the connection that you feel and the connection with the other people that you work with.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's not the sole piece, but it's a huge piece. Connection is one of our basic psychological needs. And so in order to be motivated intrinsically, we need to have that flowing well, whether that's at work or home or a combination. And so, yeah, to that point, exactly. Connection is important, but how everyone defines connection differs. Some people just want to set up the party and not be at the party, and others want to be in the middle of the party, right? And so just respecting that those are all okay, and those all perform a role in our community.
If somebody's working at their business and they're listening to this and they don't know, I know there's tools out there, but are there some easy ways people could identify maybe personality differences or some of those things that would make it easier for them to connect?
So I think right to that point, the first thing is that we recognize personality differences really quickly, right? It's kind of like when you go out for dinner. You might not know what you want to eat, but you know what you don't want to eat. You're like, I don't want the fish. I don't want pasta. I'm still not sure what I want. So the same thing's true about personality, right? So you will quickly arrive at something that makes you uncomfortable or does not jive with you, just like we do with our friend groups. So I think the first step is acknowledging that those emotions or those, feelings or just your reactions to some of those things are true and accurate. But the first thing to that follows that is that's not wrong. That person isn't necessarily trying to be difficult towards you. They are just who they are. And so to that point, you don't need to know all these personality dimensions and traits and all this stuff, but begin to recognize that you yourself are someone that might have some similarities to some other people. And, we talk about concept of chemistry, right? That's a great example of how for some people they really jive, and then for others they don't. But once you encounter that the others there you don't jive, then take a pause and recognize they are different, but I don't know what their intentions are. But I'm starting to unpack that now. Their intentions here at work are probably not to be a jerk. Their intention is probably to be helpful and to make a difference. And we all have our moments, right? Like an emotional event from the night before can really derail us that next day. But generally speaking, our intention is honorable, good, positive, in the right direction. And so by starting to recognize that, I think we'll have a more success in being tolerant of others. Like, let's just apply it to politics, right? Like, we have a mess right now, right? And if we actually stopped and thought, you know what, I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying or where they're coming from, but in their mind, it makes sense. And that's why they're doing it. It gives a little bit different level of grace to that. And because of that, we might be able to come together and have a conversation. Whereas if we didn't even arrive at that thought, we're like, nope, heck no, I'm not doing this. I'm not with you, not ever, right? And the same thing's true in work, but at least the work's not as polarized necessarily when I mean like tensions wise. And so, yeah, I think, and you have the piece of this, and some people are going to be like, not everyone's motivated and not everyone's nice. And I acknowledge that. But generally speaking, here's my kind of couple of beliefs. Day one, people are motivated to do the work and to do it well. And they actually agreed that based on the salary, that it's good enough. So that's the intention. Somewhere over time that erodes. Part of that is internal decisions, and part of that is just the organization trains people to behave otherwise despite what they want, right? We're really bad at indirectly and passively training people in a direction that we don't aspire for them to go. And so those are one of the things we have to pay attention to. But getting back to your question, yeah, we can just pay attention a little bit more to ourselves, and then hopefully recognize that the other people might sound different, look different, kind of feel different, but they might be wanting the same thing. And that creates the opportunity to give them a little bit more grace and space.
That's awesome. As I'm listening to you, can you tell me what that, maybe like the internal dialogue in your head when you're like, maybe you meet somebody they don't, you're probably good at it enough now that you don't think twice about it, but what does that look like in practice?
So working with someone different than me, or like my reaction to that?
Yeah. How do you personally, what does it look like in practice to do that? Like, does the thought occur in your head? Oh, this person has this thing that I don't like, so I need to do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, this is a great question and a couple different perspectives. One, despite knowing all this, I still have people I don't like to engage with because there's not that synergy, and it just feels difficult, and the energy is different. So it still exists, even though I'm trained in this area. For me, the biggest thing is, checking your ego, right? Because what's really driving this ship I am, right? Like a lot of it is subconscious ego stuff that prevents us from making decisions because we're trying to protect ourselves. Very a reptilian brain orientation. So it's easy for me to go into a conversation with someone and already have my guard up, or to feel like this is not going to work out. And at least I recognize that now, because once that happens, I say, look, pause, set that aside. They might have the same opinion of me, but my intention's good. So let me give them the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to kind of be successful. And 9 times out of 10 they are. Like, it's just an opportunity to connect with people, and then you really learn from people, and then you reflect upon people in your social groups at different levels, right? Some of them you agree with on so many things, some of them you don't agree with on so many things, but there's a couple things in particular that you really embrace and you share. And that's what more can we ask for,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. It sounds like you obviously have a lot of training in this area.
Mhm.
Talk to me about the training that you have versus you're just really observant.
Oh, I don't think I was always observant. um, so a little bit of my background, right? I'm a professor at Idaho State University. So I teach and I research, but I also own a consultancy that travels, and we have clients around the world in this psychology of workspace. And so for me, it was all learned. Like, that's what I learned in my mid 20s, which really shifted my mindset about everything in life, is that everything's learned. That this kind of defeatist mentality of, oh, I just can't do this, or I'm not good enough to do this. Generally speaking, we are we are born with the tools to do just about anything that's humanly possible, right? Of course, there's limitations, and then there's things that relate to those limitations. But, if I want to fix my car, I can go through a program and learn. And I'm not talking YouTube program. I'm talking about, like, I could go through a car repair program and learn how to do that. Just as a surgeon that fixed my knee went through to learn how to do that. Ultimately, it's a combination of cognitions, thoughts, and tasks and doings, right? And so we have that baked into us. And so once I realized that in my 20s, that really shifted my trajectory, that I could pretty much learn anything if it's of interest to me, right? Like, if it's fun, kind of. And that's where I started to get more deeper into the personality of work and human behavior. And now it's just a part of my everyday life. When we go out for dinner, my wife, who's also an expert in this area, we talk, we do this in a fun light of starting to profile, like, our servers and trying to get a sense of them because of where they're looking, their animations with their body, their energy when they approach the table. And then, and it's almost like, oh, they seem like they're like this. Let's see if they come back in the same manner. Oh, nope, something was an emotional hijack that derailed them. So it's just like anything else, right? You learn you want to captain a boat, you learn how to do that. You learn the science of all that. You get your endorsements and licenses, and then you can do that. And that's kind of the same route I've been on all my life.
Yeah. It makes me wonder how many people have actually thought about learning
Yeah.
about how to interact, because I think it's something we take for granted.
Yeah.
We interact from the time we're born with people, but it makes me wonder how often people attempt to learn how to do it better.
Yeah. I that's a great reflection, because I think of a couple different things. One, yeah, we kind of learn almost how we fit in, right? Like, so if you're in a family or a large group, you're kind of bumping into all these different people and personalities, and you're finding your role as, like, the third child or something like that, and your voice follows that. But you're not doomed to be the third child all the way through life. Like, you are your own person, and you can develop that and grow that. But there's a little piece that's complicating this right now, and it's this concept of authenticity. And so people will be like, well, this is who I am. Take me or leave me, and this is what you get. And when I say authenticity, that's not what my intention is. My intention is, like, authentically you, but in we'd call it a pro-social um, effort, which means that we are supporting each other through relationships, interactions, things like that. Not just, this is who I am. I'm gruff. You need to learn how to deal with it, because that doesn't seem right either. Because I'm pretty sure that person, if they're like, well, I'm gruff, you need to learn how to deal with it, probably gets their feelers hurt too by other people and wants their feelers not to be hurt by other
Mhm.
people. So it's just a complicated thing. But there's only so much we could work on at a time, I think. Like when you're trying to get a job, you're not worried about finding your purpose in life, right? And so there's like this sequencing that happens when you're trying to have a relationship, like an intimate relationship. Other things don't matter, so you're building your skills in those areas, and so it's part of it is the timing, and I think that's a big factor that affects people in organizations is that maybe they need to brush up in these areas, maybe they need to improve, but maybe they're in a fight or flight mindset because of what's going on in their life outside of that. And building this rapport is not a priority right now.
It's easy to get lost. Don't know which path to take, what to post. In the social media jungle, video is king. Your kids are obsessed, your customers are addicted, we're all hooked, and social media sites prioritize videos. So when you're ready to stand out from the crowd, reach out to 40 Deuce Films. Feeling over everything.
I'm trying to decide which way I want to go because this authentic thing is always interesting to me.
It is.
Because you do hear that. I do think that there's a lot of people that think authentic means like no holds barred.
Right.
I don't have to.
Right.
I can just be whoever I am in this moment and treat whoever however I want to. But what does being authentic actually mean in your eyes?
Oh, to me, okay, I'm glad you asked that question because I have to think about it. And to me, authenticity is an alignment between my behaviors and my values. And that's where I think that kind of notion falls apart, because that gruff, crunchy person has values of love, care, respect, support. They just haven't kind of, connected the two of them and recognized that, how they're being received is not necessarily in alignment with their values. I'll tell you a quick story for a minute. I was running a leadership retreat. We had 100 students and we had cohorts of 10 within this. And this was at a university I used to work at. And I had a cohort of 10 and we spent all week together. And so it was large group, small group, large group, small group. And the idea here was ultimately to arrive at this concept that feedback equals love. I'm giving you feedback as a demonstration of respect because really I'd like to know too if I wasn't. And over the course of the week, the quality and caliber of those conversations continue to increase, So it was really a beautiful thing. At the end of the week, one of the students said, "Rob, I'm really glad I got to spend the week with you because I saw you on campus for the last year and you always look angry and mad. And that is not who you are. You're warm, you're caring, you really are concerned about our well-being," stuff like that. So they became very generous with their comments. And that was a huge learning moment for me that what's going on here, my authentic self, right, isn't actually reflecting what I want. That's coming from here. And if anyone's not watching the video, I'm pointing at my heart. So the face is doing something, then the brain and the heart's acting on. And so that was huge because that's where I arrive at. Am I embodying, and I'm going to have my moments, we all do. Am I embodying both in action, language, behaviors, what I truly value? Are those aligned? And to me, that's where that authenticity piece is. And so some of us, all of us, have work to do in it, right? Because the other piece of it is, it was funny, is I was here when I had this realization a couple years ago. People talk about values, but they don't necessarily have the skills to live according to them.
Oh.
You ever think about that? I don't think many people haven't.
But now
really,
I want to talk about that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, but they say I have this value of, and but they don't possess the skills to live it out.
Can you give me an example?
So, perfect example in every organization I work with is accountability. Every organization struggles with accountability, difficult conversations. So if I say one of my professional values is accountability because it's important, but I, A, don't receive accountability feedback well, and or B, don't give it. So let's just say we work together and my value is accountability, and I'm your supervisor, but I don't hold you accountable. And therefore the systems are breaking down, the things are slowing down. Whatever our targets and our goals are, they're not being met in the essentially the timely manner that we espouse as an organization. And so, and accountability, like I said, it's in every organization, because we don't really like having these conversations because we don't want to damage the relationship. But if we actually think feedback is love, and at a deeper level, that I'm sharing these things with you because you would want to know that you're doing this incorrectly. Like I think about the Mike Judge movie, Office Space. You remember Office Space from like 15 years ago? Watch it now because it's still relevant. But people want to know if they're not doing something correctly. But they want to be respected in that delivery. And so accountability is a great example of a value people possess, but most of us don't have the skills to do it.
Mhm. I want to come back to feedback because there's remind me because I have this thought in my head.
Okay.
But back to when you were talking about the person that said your face and
Oh, yeah,
your
yeah.
demeanor when you
Yeah.
were walking
Yeah.
around. I think about
My RBF.
your RBF. I'm thinking about there's the verbal communication,
Yeah.
but then there's also body language,
Yeah.
which is how you're walking around.
Yeah.
So do you have anything to share about that? Just, we're talking about personality
Yeah.
differences, but is that reflected in our body language too?
Yeah. So we know that certain personality types have a little bit more RBF than others. So it's baked right in. We know that certain personality types are much more stoic in their appearance and interactions. So that stacks the deck against them. I'm one of them, right? So me coming in with a straight face, not feeling warm and inviting, suggests something to you. Doesn't mean it's accurate, right? You're arriving, you're using the input and information you're gathering through all of your senses to levy a judgment on this interaction before it even happens, right? And that's part of our challenge. But it could be totally wrong once you sit down and I lean in and you hear that the tone is warmer, generous, kind, right? And so I think what's important is that we need to pay attention to these things. We want to be approachable, right? And that has a lot to do with how we present ourselves in that nonverbal space. And it's funny because up until we started to do Zoom stuff really heavy in COVID, we never saw ourselves in a camera. Like the best we had was in the morning, getting ready in the bathroom, looking at the mirror and actually, doing the, you're getting yourself ready and trying to look as, this is my headshot look. Okay. Now I'm going out in the world that way. The moment I walk out the door, I don't look like that anymore. I'm carrying my demeanors, my energy, my emotions, the stuff that's stacked on from the day before. But then when we got into COVID, we could see everyone. And it's not even us we saw, because you couldn't really look at yourself because you watch people look in the camera to see themselves, and then they look down at their profile to see what they actually look like. But you start to look at other people in these meetings, and they're like, they look really bored or angry or annoyed or whatever. And so hopefully we could take those as cues and reminders that I wonder how I'm looking. I wonder how I'm being perceived. And if you're curious, and if you're in an organization, ask people around you.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be all that honest because of certain dynamics in the organization, but you might get some good feedback. And if you have a healthy organization, you should be having those 360-degree reviews and feedback sessions so that you learn that, oh, this is some area I can improve to embrace this team more, to be more welcoming, things like that. I've learned, I've had 250 employees at one point, and I learned that when I walk in the room, I could shut the room down by my body energy that I carry into my room. So I need to flesh that, shake that off before I walk into that room, because emotions are contagious, and I can sabotage an office inadvertently with just carrying in the junk that I was dealing with last night because of whatever, my kids' grades or whatever it was that's still hanging on me.
Absolutely. So back to the feedback
Yeah.
part of it, because I think that's interesting. A few years ago, I started a survey we have a women's leadership event, and the one thing that kept coming up was that women don't feel like other women are supporting
Yeah.
other women and in having conversations. One thing that stuck out to me was there's we expect support of another person that we care about to look like, yeah, go get it, rah, rah.
Yeah.
But my belief is also that it's having tough conversations.
Yeah.
I don't like that thing that you did, or
Yeah.
have you considered, or
Yeah.
some of those kinds of things. So I
Yeah.
actually agree with we need to be better at feedback in general. And
Yeah.
I think we've all heard the term ghosting. I think we even see it in relationships where people just ghost each other because that's easier somehow than having a feedback conversation.
Yeah.
So what's the answer? How do you give feedback? How do you make giving feedback easier? Or how do you make it part of your values that you care about?
So can you save that question? I want to kind of popcorn around real quick.
Okay.
One, you're of this minority group that is actually wired to do feedback comfortably. So based on your personality dimensions. So this makes you a little different because you're even interested and engaged in that conversation in and of itself. What else was I going to say? Oh, two, who are you seeking feedback from? So it's funny when we do workshops and activities and we ask people to receive feedback as a part of like emotional intelligence activity. We always have a caveat though, because it's like, I'm not sure you want to ask your friends because your friends are kind of supposed to support you, right? And then they might not give you the feedback that you actually truly need. So you need to really think about who could be your feedback mechanism, who could be your coach, who could be that person for you that knows you well enough, but also understands what they need to do there. All right, now let's get back to your question. So the question is how do we approach it, or what was that again? If you
how do we get better at giving it, and how do we get better at receiving it? What's something we could do?
I think a couple thoughts all over the place. Let's start with better. How do we do better at giving? So from an organizational standpoint, and even from a in-home standpoint, and I use these in both environments, I'm not good at giving feedback. I was raised in a family that avoided confrontation, and I carried that into my life, and it created a mess out of a bunch of things. And since I've acknowledged that, I've taken the steps to train and build and change in that. What we recommend with our clients, and I do this at home with my boys even, is to build an agenda, a script. So if you and I are going to have a meeting and I have to give you some feedback, first off, I have to acknowledge that it may or may not be well received. And that's just the fact. Like, it's probably not going to be well received. Even if I know I made the mistake, it still somehow stings when I get that feedback, right? So I'm going to acknowledge that you might not be happy with this. But I script it, and then I plan to have that meeting. Because if I don't script it because I'm feedback and confrontation averse, I'd be like walking down that hall Friday, go talk to Heather, and I'd get close to your office. If I didn't have it scripted, if I didn't commit to it, I'd be like, I'll just wait until Monday and talk to her then, right? Like that's because I'm protecting myself, unfortunately. So script it. Now, instead, I have this script in my hand. I'm committing to it. Now I walk down the hall and I say, Heather, I have some feedback to give you. And all I ask is that you let me read through it, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And people get really weird about this. They're like, well, you seem really inexperienced or, uncertain if you have to read it. I was like, but what's your alternative? Like, you're not doing it, period. Like, if you're good at it, it's like a speech, like a keynote speaker. You better have notes until you learn it, because you're going to hem and haw and ramble. Well, it's kind of like our conversation before we started about podcasting, right? Like, if you don't have notes to actually get your thoughts together or what the delivery is going to look like on a keynote stage, you're just going to be all over the place and you're not going to do the job well. And the same thing's true in a feedback. I don't need it anymore because I've learned and trained it for enough. But I still use it, especially with my boys at home, that I'll script it out and walk them through it and establish some parameters that, I'm here. This is because I love you or support you and I want you to understand this. But just let me finish what I have to say and then let's talk about it. And by chunking it out that way, we remove the energy from the event. If I don't, and I'm just like, Heather, we have to talk, or I have some feedback for you. And then you're like, well, as a matter of fact, I have some feedback for you too. You know what I mean? Like, it's just all of a sudden it's adversarial. And one way to make this even better is that in organizations and with my clients, we don't do feedback unannounced for the most part, that it's actually baked into one-on-ones. Now, if you don't have regular one-on-ones, then we need to think of a different mechanism that makes sense. But our one-on-ones are a time to check in. And on every one-on-one agenda with my clients, after we get through the business of conversation, there's a spot for feedback for Heather, feedback for Rob. And the idea is that we're constantly giving each other just drips, little pieces, right? What we're trying to avoid is that annual evaluation with surprises ultimately, right? Yeah. And so we're building a system for this. And that's what I take into all other areas of my life. If I didn't have a system, I wouldn't be here right now, because I rely heavily on strategy and system to plan my life, tools that help me with that. And so that's what we're doing, is identifying steps and breaking things down to bit by bit by bit, because how else are we going to do it? We're not gifted. This doesn't happen naturally. Most things in life are developed. A surgeon is not born a surgeon, right? A pro sports person might be very gifted, but they still have to work at it to really refine it, especially to compete nowadays in the level of competition out there. There was a time when I was playing that you could, you could still be a regular drinker and smoker even and still play professional hockey. Those days don't exist anymore. Like, we figured out all the science to that. So you still have to work to do those things.
Well, I feel like we could have spent like 2 more hours.
Yes.
There's so much more I want to talk about, but we are nearing the end of our time.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
I will put a link to who you are and all the things, because you share a lot on LinkedIn for anybody who's watching. And I just really appreciate it. And I think the things that stand out to me, I think your comment was feedback is love or something like that. I love that concept, and that work should fuel our human spirit. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks for your time. This was a lot of fun.